Wyatt. All right, welcome to the Ohio State of Mind podcast. This is your host, Josh Keatley, and we have a man down. Michael Chen is not going to be joining us tonight. He is on baby duty. He's probably not watching. So, Michael, no joking. But today with me is a very special guest, my go-to for emergency situations, who had a wild week last week doing a 6-hour mock draft podcast. I was on for 30 minutes of it. Brock Vierra, who's in his home state of Hawaii. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good, man. Just landed, got off the plane, smelled the beautiful, fresh Hawaiian air. Ready to roll on this, especially after a busy week last week. We had that draft. We had Carol Makapalooza.
Dude.
So it's been go. But I'm excited, and we got a lot of really great Ohio State Buckeye draft prospects to talk about. Just so excited for this draft season.
Yeah, man. I know you're a big draft guy. I was really happy you could come on. I know that you've been on the show before, and I know how your feelings towards Ohio State. And you're not an Ohio State hater by any means, but you're very non-biased. This is a pretty biased show. A lot of people we bring on are pretty biased, right? Everybody's an Ohio State fan, yada yada yada. So I always appreciate your 2 cents. Sorry for everybody out there. I'm sick a little bit. But when it comes to the draft, you are a draft expert. You're somebody that we've been doing mock drafts and talking draft-wise for a long time. So I'm very excited to see what you have to say. We'll just dive in if that's okay with you.
Let's do it.
All right, let's just go by position here. I promise to get you out of here within 45 minutes. Obviously, there's no big quarterbacks. So let me just go ahead and tweet this out for everybody. Nice. All right. There's no big quarterback draft prospects. Obviously, there's not really much to say there. It looks like J.J. McCarthy's going to be the first Big Ten quarterback off the board, according to everybody and all the experts. We'll certainly see about that. But at the running back position, that's where the fun begins. Mayan Williams is draft eligible. You said something interesting pre-show when you wanted a list of who we were going to talk about, and you made mention that you kind of thought Mayan Williams was on the fringe of being even draft worthy, if you will. Yeah. So what are your thoughts on Mayan Williams?
I still feel that's the same way. And quite frankly, I think that's probably the best thing for Mayan Williams is to become a UDFA. And the reason why is because he'll be able to negotiate his own contract and also find a situation that is ideal for him. You talk about a player that has an injury history at a position that is known for having short lifespan in the NFL. And quite frankly, from what we've seen for the past couple of seasons, there's been tremendous value in 7th round to UDFA running backs. I think Isaiah Pacheco really encapsulates that statement. But another one was Keaton Mitchell for the Baltimore Ravens before he got hurt, obviously, last season as a UDFA out of East Carolina. I mean, when you look at this running back class, there's some really, really nice players. And unfortunately, Mayan Williams doesn't have the explosive ability that one would look for when drafting him in the first 1 or 2 days. We've talked about him before. He's a classic Ohio State thumper, bruiser, get you those critical 2 or 3 yards. The kind of running back you need, but not the running back you necessarily want, which is kind of an idiotic statement to say because I don't believe that. Because I want a guy like Mayan Williams, a guy that can get me the critical yards in critical times. But unfortunately, as we've seen with NFL front offices, that's not the desired thing to go out and select a guy with. So that's why, even though I think he should be selected, I think the possibility he gets selected, I really don't see him getting selected any higher than the 6th round. And quite frankly, I think he ends up being a UDFA just because of all those factors.
Wow. Well, I think everything. I know what you're saying too. It sounds counterintuitive, he's the guy you need, but you don't really want. Yeah. But it makes sense because running backs that have one gear. Guys that go in the first round, 10 years ago, you would see a running back. Mayan Williams, even 10 years ago, wasn't going to be a first-round back, right? So that's kind of silly to even to start the conversation with that. But, we've developed, but at least you would want a bell cow. It didn't matter if they were a good receiver. To be a first-round running back, you need to be a good receiver. Mayan Williams is not. He's not a 3-down back. Well, now, in order to be a 2nd or 3rd-round running back, you need to have that breakaway ability, and he doesn't have that either. Right. So I did give him a 4th round grade. But, for those listening, those who follow my work at Brownswire, all that, that I grade like I make love. I'm a very giving lover. I'm a very giving grader. OK, so, it was
shout out to Mrs. Keatley for that statement as well.
So it wouldn't surprise me to see him fall to the 5th or 6th round, but I think at that point you're getting quite the value. It wouldn't surprise me to see him get drafted in the 4th round. I guess is the moral of my story, because I could see an NFL GM falling in love with his size, right? You're talking about a guy who's at 5'9", 225 pounds. That that's a thick dude. That's a guy that's built like a bell cow. His injury issues, I know that they were frequent, but there's, nothing was ever torn. Nothing was ever so detrimental that he missed an entire season. So I feel like you see guys bounce back from those kind of injuries fairly soon, and it doesn't really affect him too much. He's a very powerful runner. He gets you your 3 yards. You compared him to some of the classic Ohio State running backs of the past. I would agree with that. He's like a roided up Master Teague. He's much better than Master Teague, but he's in that same category, right? The same category of a guy. Like, again, I think he's better than Mike Weber, but he's in that same kind of category. But yeah, that's a guy I like. Oh, my boy Casey, Browns expert. Troy Benson would have been a slam dunk.
Oh.
I do agree with that.
Don't get me started on Trey Benson. I was so high on him, especially after the Big Ten championship game, I believe, against Northwestern. And even I was thinking he had a pretty good performance against Clemson as well. I don't remember. I didn't watch that game, unfortunately, so I don't remember exactly. But I think the problem with Trey Benson is kind of be the same problem that lands at Mayan Williams and lands at a lot of running backs of this style. Is that one, Benson got hurt in the first play of the national championship game, so we never got to see him explode against an Alabama defense that could have been.
You talk about Trey Sermon?
Fuck, I am talking about Trey Sermon.
Trey Benson.
Wow. Wow. Oh my. Wow. I apologize.
Yeah.
I saw the name Trey and it sent me back to a better time.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree with Casey. Trey Benson, the running back from Florida State. I think he would be a first round pick 10 years ago. He was a transfer from Oregon. I had to think. I was like, has Oregon already played the Big Ten? You're referencing Trey Sermon. Trey Sermon. I was on the podcast. This is a fun walk down memory lane. I was on a podcast with Donovan. I wish Donovan was on the show. He could vouch for me. And we were doing the mock draft of Palooza, and Trey Sermon got drafted in the 2nd or 3rd round, which ended up being where he really got drafted by the San Francisco 49ers. I think it was in the 3rd round. And, he was hailed as the next coming, this next starter. And I was on his podcast, and I said, that dude is average. That dude is an average running back. That dude is very much in the same vein as a guy like Joe Montgomery. Right? That's what you're going to see. And that ended up being what happened. Trey Sermon was very much a flash in the pan. He looked really good against Northwestern, looked really good against Clemson. He was a great outside runner, didn't really run behind his pads, ran a little too high. That was always Trey Sermon's issue. Now, did I think he was going to be this bad? No. And I think he can still recover. But Trey Sermon, I feel like Mayan Williams is kind of like the bizarro Trey Sermon. Very, very similar runners in which they are one style, and that's all they do. Casey's got another comment here. Mayan's running style reminds me of Beast Mode. I agree with that 100%.
Yeah,
the big difference is, in my eyes, is that Marshawn obviously had that second gear. Right, once he got past that second level, he could take it to the end zone, 75 yards down the field. Mayan's never going to do that. Brock, would you agree with that statement?
I completely agree with that. And Mayan is beast mode-esque in the fact that he's not going down after first contact, right?
Yeah.
So in that way, but like you mentioned, there's a lot of guys that have that style, but we haven't seen that. Let's see. Absolutely. We're going to talk about those two guys a little bit later on. But going back to Mayan Williams and even Trey Benson in general, unfortunately, NFL GMs want a running back that can play running back and slot receiver. Like that's like they want a guy that is a runner and also like Randall Cobb, essentially.
Yeah.
Like
Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley.
And not trying to throw a little shade on there, but the reason that also happens is because there's just been a lot of busts, not even the high part of the first round, but also the back half of the first round. And not trying to throw another Beanie Wells is kind of like the prime example, in my opinion. Like,
well, Beanie Wells got hurt.
True, but what I'm saying is that if his style of play translated to the league and his health in Arizona, I think we could have seen something different. But unfortunately, it didn't. And then you saw a guy like David Johnson come out of nowhere, essentially, and then have that big run, like 5 years later.
I do disagree with that because Beanie Wells had a pretty okay rookie year, and then he hit over 1,000 yards as a second-year player, and then he got hurt. He was kind of never to hear from again. And that guy was that. I mean, that guy did have breakaway speed. That guy was, in the same vein as, I don't know, Derrick Henry. Does that make sense? Like sometimes those guys that you think that are just behind the pad downhill runners, they do have that extra second gear. It's just that's not their go-to. Their go-to is to ground and pound. But I mean, I understand what you're saying. I just think that Beanie Wells was built different. I mean, dude, that guy
was built different. I'm just saying, since his success didn't translate, I'm not saying it was him, but I'm saying he was one of many that when you have a first rounder, especially nowadays, they cannot be above average. They need to be stellar, right? And that's why we saw. Continue. I mean, even the Alabama guys, Mark Ingram, who had a very long, successful career, right? He was a first rounder, and who he was, right? Trent Richardson, obviously, we know what happened with him, and because of that, you saw like a guy like Derrick Henry fall to the second, And I think that's kind of like the issue is that they're not. They want that first round picks. You either want linemen or dynamic playmakers at whatever position you pick them. And unfortunately, for the running back position, that has changed so much over what that visual looks like. That you're seeing classic running backs like a guy like Benson or a guy like Maya Williams fall from where they should be just because of what the expected production of them is not what the league requires nowadays.
So there's a couple things I want to touch on. First of all, I want to kind of Isaac writes, this is the owner, proprietor of Kip's Cards at the Colony Square Mall in Zanesville, Ohio. Isaac's always giving me rad deals on trading cards. Also the host of one of the meanest shows, card shows in Central Ohio. But to see the running back position be so devalued at this point is insane. But to be fair, next season we'll see two Buckeyes potentially be in the first two rounds. We'll be excited. Yeah, 100%. Quinshon Judkins to Travion Henderson. Those guys are right there. Like Brock said, we are going to touch on that. Some of the running backs you named, I understand what you're saying, right? But some of those running backs, they did fit. They did what they were supposed to do. But it's not that they weren't good. It's not that they were busts. It's just they were ran into the ground, right? Another example of another one of those guys is Doug Martin. Doug Martin was really good.
He was so cold and Tampa Bay.
Yeah, he was good for 3 years. He got ran into the ground and he was done. Now Beanie Wells was injury prone. I don't have an excuse for that. He wasn't running to the ground. That dude was injury prone. But Zeke Elliott, that guy was a difference maker for 3 years. Same style running back we're talking about. Ran to the goddamn ground, right? You see that a lot. That's the problem with the running back, and with contracts the way they are, and the way the NFL is moving, you're drafting these. It's hard to take a running back with a top 10 pick. That's you're only going to be able to run hard for 3 years. But in the back half, you look at like guys like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who's a bust. But teams like the Chiefs, the Ravens, those guys are going to be more likely to take a running back. Jonathan Brooks out of Texas, I don't think he's going to be drafted in the first round. But if he would have had a little more, I think if he could do more, that could be a running back taken in the first round. Because those teams are willing to do it because they're so close. But if you're a team that blows, like let's say, I don't know, name it, the Panthers, a running back's not going to help you because by the time that running back's career is over, he's not a star anymore. Bryce Young is still learning the position, right? And the NFL has changed so much that guys like Earl Campbell that lasted 9 years, they don't exist. I mean, we're seeing it with the Browns with Nick Chubb, and I'm kind of in denial about it and love Nick Chubb, but that's kind of what you see, right? There's the demise is coming. What are you going to do? Casey has another point. I thought Beanie was going to be an all-pro. I think he would have been. He just got hurt. Some of those guys, the same argument for him you can make with Marcus Lattimore. When you're hurt as a running back, it's really hard to come back. Some of those guys are just injury prone. That's the way it is, right? I mean, the list goes on and on of guys that could have been all-pro that, didn't quite make it. I think we're ready to move on to the wide receiver position. Did you have anything else to add about Maya Williams?
All I can say is whoever gets Maya Williams, if they can get him on the field, they're going to have an excellent running back who's going to be able to get them critical yards in critical situations. And I do hope that he gets drafted fairly high. Unfortunately, the market is just not in his favor at the moment.
Yeah, I think he's going to be a solid running back. I think
I'm a big fan of his. I've enjoyed watching him.
Yeah, he's either going to be, I don't know, a guy that gets ridden hard for a couple of years and is out of the NFL, or he's going to be a guy that lasts in the NFL for 10 years as like a Frank Gore light. You know what I mean? Like that. Those are your options. Moving on to the wide receiver position, we got Marvin Harrison Jr. There's not really much to discuss here. That's a future Hall of Famer. In my eyes, he is the surefire generational talent of this year's class. Every year I feel like there is one. It's him. I think that he's an automatic star first day with whoever takes him, even despite the bad quarterback play. That's kind of how I view Marvin Harrison Jr. Do you see it any other way?
The only way his career gets thrown to the shitter if it's somehow he goes to the Giants, which is very unlikely. If he goes to Arizona, Hall of Famer. If he goes to the Chargers, Hall of Famer. If he goes to virtually any team outside of like the Giants and maybe like a couple others, like Hall of Famer. When I look at a player like Marvin Harrison Jr., all you see is legacy and then playmaker, right? And a lot of times people have difficulty shedding the shadow that is their fathers. Marvin Harrison Jr. has clearly eclipsed his dad in collegiate play in terms of popularity, in terms of success, in terms of just being that dude, right? So if he already is able to dominate at this level, plus we already see the relationship that he has with his father and how much his father desires him to be better than how he was, everything's pointing to it. Plus Kyler Murray, Justin Herbert, as long as they're on the field, they can get on the ball in any position. He's going to be a stud. Nothing more to say.
I agree. Casey's got another interesting running back point. A good team could scoop up a running back like Marshawn Lloyd up in the fourth, and he'll be a difference maker. I gave Marshawn Lloyd a third rounder. I agree with you. Like I said, I grade pretty favorable. So in the fourth round would be a steal in my eyes. I think that him, Braylon Allen from Wisconsin, and Ray Davis from Kentucky are all in that same tier where they can all be starters in the NFL, and I wouldn't blink an eye. Brock, do you have anything to add on that comment?
The only thing I will say is, as of my current running back rankings, I actually have Braylon Allen as my number 2 behind Benson.
Your number 2 running back?
Yes. I think that he has yet to even hit his peak in terms of like production. I think that he would be a first rounder if Luke Fickell was not his head coach. He's not a guy you run out of shotgun. He's a guy that you put a quarterback on the center and you run downhill. He's 20 years old. When he hits 22, 23, if he can stay healthy, of course, that's a major question. But if he can stay healthy, we're talking about a guy that's going to average between 13 to 1,600 yards a season.
So here's the deal. I spoke to an NFL scout about Braylon Allen, and he kind of said a lot of the same stuff you did. He said Wisconsin is screwing. I can't remember exactly what he said, but basically along the lines of Wisconsin is screwing over Braylon Allen. That guy is a Clydesdale, and they're running him out there like a pony or something like. He said something like that. He said that guy's a thoroughbred, and he's being misused. I'm with you. I think Braylon Allen has all the potential to be a star in the NFL. He's young, he's big, he's fast, he's strong. I got to see him in person a couple times, and he's just got an amazing, and he's just very intimidating specimen to look at. The thing with Braylon Allen, though, the reason why I don't have him in that elite tier, on my list, he's the number 5 running back. I got Brooks, Benson, Corum, Wright, and then Allen. I have all those guys a tier above Allen. Allen is right in that second tier, because Allen runs straight up and down. And he is a big dude to be running straight up and down. That's the kind of dude who gets knocked around a couple times and his career is done. It's very, very hard for guys that he already runs super upright. So even if he learns to run lower, he's still going to be super upright because he's so tall. You know what I mean? Like some of those taller guys, they can run low, but he doesn't do that at all. He runs straight up and down. Darren McFadden kind of did the same deal. But again, I think that I agree with you. He's got some big time potential. No love for the leading rusher in the SEC. Well, since Cody Schrader is at almost the ripe old age of 30, he's got. No, I gave Schrader a 4th round grade, right there next to Jace McClellan from Alabama and Audric Estime. He's older. He does.
Wow, you have McClellan a lot higher than I do. I just want to add that.
Where do you have McClellan?
6th round grade.
Huh.
I don't have my rankings in front of me, but like he's in like the double digits of like my running back rankings.
We're getting off topic. Where do you have Cody Schrader?
Schrader, I have him kind of the same as you. I have him be a 4th, but more likely a 5th round pick just because of the market.
Yeah, he's small, he's older, and he doesn't have any breakaway speed. At that point, that is the running back. I mean, I would rather take Schroeder than Maya Williams because Schroeder is more consistent and he does catch the ball better out of the backfield and he doesn't get as hurt as Maya Williams, but they're in the same tier.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you agree?
I completely agree. Like,
yeah,
I don't know. They just feel like guys that, to quote my dear friend Bill Carroll, they're gonna have a cup of coffee in the NFL and then they'll move on to being the manager or owner of their local enterprise. Like,
well, and that's the thing. I
their fault. It's just is what it is.
I don't want to spend too much time on this because Isaac's got another good question here to cover. But the thing about Schrader, I would take Schrader over Mayan Williams because, and go back to, since we're quoting Bill Carroll, we'll call this the Quoting Bill Carroll show. If you can't produce in college, what makes you think you can produce in the pros? And Mayan Williams did produce, but it was always flashes. Cody Schrader is the definition of a producer, right? So if I'm sitting there in the 4th round or 5th round and both those guys are on the board and I need a running back, I'm taking Schrader over Mayan Williams 9 times out of 10. I don't think that, with that said, I don't think all GMs will feel that way because Mayan Williams he runs with more power when he is healthy. I think that power is more sustainable at the NFL level from Mayan Williams. So I don't think all GMs are going to, it would not surprise me if the opposite happened. Mayan Williams went off the board before Cody Schrader, but that's not what I would do. Would you agree with that statement?
I completely agree with that statement.
All right, let's move on. Isaac's got another question. Bias aside, is Marv undoubtedly better than Neighbors? You want to hit this first? You want me to hit this first?
I'll hit this first, and I'll let you finish because you have more of an in-depth look at Marv. I wouldn't use the word undoubtedly, and that's because I believe receivers are unfortunately compared on a same plane when their prototypes or archetypes are completely different. And that's not a statement between Marv and Neighbors. That's across the league. There are some guys that are really good with yards at the catch, some guys that are really good at jump balls, some guys are really good at that. And there has to be a wide divide and to say one guy is undoubtedly better than the others. When you look at Marvin Harrison Jr., you're going to get a guy that's going to win every one-on-one matchup. You have a guy that's going to be able to go at stag battles of the air. You have a guy that's going to be able to run the route tree efficiently. And you have a guy that's going to be available at every single moment. When you have a guy like Malik Neighbors, he may not have the ability to just moss people 24/7, but you put the ball in his hands and he can have breakaway speed that will take a 5-yard pass to a touchdown instantly. And I don't really have the same feeling with Marvin Harrison Jr. So I wouldn't use the word undoubtedly. I just use the word different. And I think both of them are going to be all pros. Both of them are going to be very successful at teams they play for. And it's for me right now, it's 1A and 1B for Marv and for Neighbors.
So I agree with most of what you're saying. I agree with what you're saying, but I wouldn't use the term undoubtedly. I'm taking Marvin Harrison over Malik Neighbors 10 times out of 10 times because I believe that Marvin Harrison, his floor is going to be a very, very good starting wide receiver. Malik Neighbors, in my eyes, his floor is much lower. He could be a bust. There's bust potential there. There's not Marvin Harrison's resume is longer. It's thicker. He got more attention. I mean, Malik Neighbors was also playing next to Brian Thomas, who's also going to be a first-round wide receiver. Marvin Harrison played next to guys that are pretty bumped and bruised, and he took the show away from Jackson Smith-Njigba a couple of years ago. He got double-teamed and bracketed a lot this season, and he still really shined, even though all defenses knew what they were doing. And he played well with a good quarterback, and he played well with a bad quarterback. So you know what you're getting with Marvin Harrison Jr. You also know you're getting a guy that's a very professional, very mellow kind of guy. Wide receivers are very dramatic. They turn into drama queens very, very fast. I don't know Malik Neighbors' personality. I know that people describe him as a dog. I know that I've heard very good things about his personality, and I know that he's been described as very ferocious, and I know a lot of people like that. I know a lot of people who like the fact that Malik Neighbors seems more aggressive than Marvin Harrison Jr. I don't, in my wide receiver. I would rather have a guy that's mellow and is going to do his job and seems like he's going to be comfortable on a struggling team, maybe being second fiddle at start, yada, 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 with Marvin Harrison. So I'm taking Marvin Harrison 10 times out of 10 times. But I agree with you, Brock, and what you said, that it's kind of whatever flavor you want as far as those GMs go. And I would throw Roman Dunze in there too. I think that there's probably a rogue GM out there that probably likes Ndunze more than all of them. Ndunze was an explosive offense, very fast, also has the size. There's probably someone out there that likes Ndunze more than those two. So those guys are all right up there in the same tier. But I do think Marvin Harrison Jr. is is better.
That's fair. And before we move on, I do want to add one thing. Obviously, situations matter, right? I think that's a big thing, 100%. Right? So whichever, if the Chargers and the Cardinals take a receiver, I think the guy that ends up on the Chargers is going to have the more consistent career in terms of like production. But I think in terms of explosiveness, I think the guy that ends up on the Cardinals could potentially be the guy that becomes that Rookie of the Year candidate. Because the way I see the Cardinals set up, they're going to be airing that thing often. And I think that if Harrison or Neighbors, they're going to get substantially more targets than if they were the Chargers.
I don't know. I would have initially. I think that you were 100% right. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. It'd be really. I don't want to feel comfortable making expectations and predictions about the situation year 2, year 3, as far because you're talking about statistical output, right? Accolades output, right? And a lot of that has, situational output, which is less about, hey, is that guy good? And more about, hey, is his surrounding cast good? Hey, does he have a good coach? Hey, what's the competition like, right? I don't know what's going to happen with Kyler Murray and the Cardinals. I have no idea. I know that the Chargers have a fresh start. I know that Justin Herbert is a goddamn dog, and I know that he ain't going to go nowhere. And I know that Harbaugh is a very, very good coach. I think Gannon's a good coach too, based off of what we've seen. But we don't know. The Cardinals are not a good team. They just flat out are not a good team. So anything could happen. So I that's kind of why, any of these guys could be a bust too. One of these guys could be bumped and bruised, hold out. We see it with wide receivers all the time. Usually we don't see it with wide receivers this early. Most of your busts come in that second tier, late first round wide receivers. You're talking about Jahan Dotson. Again, these guys are all still young, so it's a little not fair to call them busts. But guys that have looked worse than guys that are the precursors are likely going to be that they're not going to be stars. Jahan Dotson in Washington, Quentin Johnson for the Chargers. The other TCU guy that was drafted by Jalen Reagor, right? The list of AJ Jenkins from Illinois, if you want to go way back. Wow. But a lot of those guys don't. That second tier first round wide receivers, those guys are the ones that typically don't make it. Usually your top tier wide receiver, they're at least okay. Right, it's been a long time since a wide receiver's been drafted in the top 15 that wasn't at least okay. Someone double check that.
I completely agree. I'm before we move on, I think when you talk about that tier, I think Brian Thomas is the cutoff. After him, I think that's when you get to that question mark. You guys like A.D. Mitchell, possibly Troy Franklin, Xavier Worthy, players like that. I think that's when you got the question marks. But with these guys, Odunze, Neighbors, Marv, Pro Bowls, All Pros, successful careers, no doubt. Unless, of course, they go to the Giants.
Yeah,
then
there's definitely there. I gave 7 wide receivers a first round grade, and to act like all 7 of those guys are going to be Pro Bowls is probably nonsense. I'm probably with you where my cutoff would be Brian Thomas, because right after that it's Xavier Leggett, which a lot of people don't even have a first round grade, right? But that next tier is Leggett, Adonai Mitchell, Xavier Worthy. I would think that in the right, but again, a lot of that's dependent on scheme, because a lot of those guys, the reason why they're not higher is because that they lack a certain something, right? Leggett experience and dealt with some injuries, Xavier Worthy and Mitchell's lack of inconsistency, drop balls, yada yada yada, and Worthy is 160 pounds, right? But in the right situation, all those guys can thrive. We've seen guys shine that were drafted in the back half of the first round. We've seen wide receivers shine in the second round, third round. So, take that with a grain of salt. But moving on to tight end, Cade Stover. I gave him a 3rd round grade. I think that he is the reason why I like Cade Stover. I think that Cade Stover is going to be a potential star in the NFL is that he does everything really, really good, but he does nothing elite, right? He doesn't do anything bad. He's just not elite at anything, but he's really, really good at everything. And he's very physical, so he can be an inline blocker, and he can run after the catch. Which is what you see a lot of star tight ends have those qualities. Travis Kelce has all those qualities. Travis Kelce's not the best pure athlete on the field. He's very much like Cade Stover, where it's like you watch him and you're like, yeah, that guy's faster than your average tight end, stronger than your average tight end, but he's not the fastest. He's not the strongest. Guys like, is Kyle Pitt, Cade Stover's not Kyle Pitt's like prospect, but that's a guy I think you can draft to the 3rd or 4th round, and he's going to start in the NFL. I don't have any issue with saying that. It's hard to find a tight end to compare him to, because I always go to the AFC North. I mean, Mark Andrews is very in the same area as Cade Stover, because Mark Andrews was drafted after Hayden Hurst. Why? Because Hayden Hurst was the more explosive athlete. Hayden Hurst was the flashier tight end. Mark Andrews was more of that guy like, he's okay. He does everything really, really well. He's going to play in the NFL, right? Cade Stover is a notch below that, I think. A notch below that, a notch above Harrison Bryant.
Okay, so I like Cade Stover. I want to preface that by saying this. I agree with the third round grade. I'm doing my best to try and take off the helmet blinders that comes with the draft when it comes to Ohio State tight ends.
Tell me what is the stereotype with Ohio State tight ends? Because I feel like that stereotype, I feel like there is no stereotype, because it's kind of all over the place. There's been some guys that have been successful, and there's been some guys that you would probably classify as bust, right? Like Nick Van Nett was drafted in the third round, and he's had a pretty okay career. He's done some good things. He's done some bad things. Yeah. Jeff Hireman, I would probably classify him as a bust. Drafted in the third round, doesn't really see the field much. Still in the NFL, doesn't see the field much. Jeremy Rucker, he's kind of too young to tell. What else is out there? You could go way back into Darnell Sanders. I would classify him as a bust. Ricky Dudley was a first-round pick. That guy was very, very, very good. We could go back even further. John Frank, who was a second-rounder. He was catching Super Bowl touchdown passes from Joe Montana. I don't. What's the stereotype? I guess
serviceable.
Okay, but even if he's serviceable and you're getting him in the third or fourth round, so we're saying the same thing. So we both agree he's got a very high floor.
So the thing with me though, right, is like I'm so tempted if I'm a team with like a late second rounder and I have a clear need at that position, or like I have an aging out tight end. What's up?
Okay. You said second round?
Like late second round. I'm just saying, because as of right now, I see like Hunter Henry, right? But I could also see him taking that kind of step up into being what's a better comp for that? Like a better, I don't know the word better Hunter Henry, but sorry, continue.
He's worse than Hunter Henry was. Hunter Henry was a much better athlete.
Hunter Henry coming out was better, but then injuries and shit. I'm talking about current Hunter Henry.
I don't know. That's a little unfair because he's
okay. You know what? Actually, that's what I'm gonna go with. I think he's like current Hunter Henry, and I think he could potentially be early on Hunter Henry, if that makes sense.
I don't know. I feel like I agree with he could be prime Hunter Henry. Hunter Henry's just so bumped and bruised. I mean, he's just so bumped and bruised. I just would think that Cade Stover can do better than that. Let's put it this way. You've said some things that are nicer than what I would have said about Cade. So I think we're saying the same thing, because you've said some things that are nicer. I'm not taking Cade Stover in the second round. Even the back half of the second round, if Brock Bowers and Jatavian Sanders are off the board, I'm not taking Cade Stover. Assuming that the draft board is falling the way we see it, because you're going to be really upset if you take Cade Stover in the second round and he can't hit the seam, right? You drafted tight end in the second round. Hunter Henry was drafted in the second round, and that dude was a difference maker, right? TJ Hawkins, who was the guy that just got drafted by the Lions last year? Oh my God, I can't believe I'm an idiot. Yeah, Sam Laporta. That was a second round pick. So you're going to be Jatavian Sanders has that kind of potential to impact a game immediately. Cade Stover, I don't think he has the athleticism to have that immediate impact, if that makes sense. I would not take him.
I'm just saying, you have a player that's clearly a hard worker, very physical. If you have maybe let's say a starter need, but you have like an aging out tight end and you have some comp picks behind you, why not take a chance on him? Like, I'm not saying he was going to develop into a star, but like a physical tight end that could potentially grow. Like, what's not to love?
Yeah, I like I said, I think he's got a high floor and a high enough ceiling to be a quarterback's favorite target in a very effective offense. All right, let's move on to the offensive line. There's really only one offensive line prospect that I wrote down. It was Matthew Jones. I didn't give him. I don't think he's getting drafted, dude. Like I said, I'm a pretty generous grader, and I don't see him getting drafted. That's a guy who was in college for 6 years, was moved around from guard to center, he was kind of a liability at Ohio State. I don't see that being – I think he's going to get a camp invite. I just don't think he's going to be –
I don't even think he's a UDFA. I think he's a camp invite. I don't really think there's anything more to say. I think he's a camp invite only based off his helmet, if I'm being honest with you.
I think that's probably fair. I mean, he deserves, even if it wasn't for his helmet, he deserves a look because the dude was a starter in the Big Ten for 2 years, right? He deserves to get a peek. I just don't think there's anything there.
I mean, I'm gonna be a star in the Big Ten for 2 years. I mean, that program would have had to have the death penalty 2 years ago. But like, I'm just saying, like, just because a conference that really doesn't mean. Maybe it's different for you, but it doesn't mean anything to me.
It doesn't mean anything when you're drafting the guy, but the dude should get. If I'm looking at all the undrafted free agents and I see there's a guy that was a starter in the Big Ten for 2 years, picking up the phone. It doesn't cost you anything. I'm not drafting him just based off of that, but I'm picking up the phone. I'm saying, what's going on with this guy? How come no one picked him up? You know what I mean? I mean, at that point, the list is so large of guys that are available that's kind of, you're not. It doesn't cost you anything to pick up the phone. So that's kind of where I'm at with Matt Jones. I do believe that he deserves a shot. I just don't think he's doing it.
It doesn't, but at the same time, especially with the offensive line, like in general, you see a lot of teams want to use a lot of those UDFA signings and even those cap invites on a bunch of D2, D3 guys that we don't exactly know where they're at compared to the guy we've seen at D1 level. And, we've seen kind of where he's at because the potential for growth is so limited there. Or at least if you have like a D2, D3 guy, we don't necessarily have all the information of what they would compare like against quality competition.
But see, I disagree with that. I disagree with that because if you look at a team like that, I think that you're right with some teams, but like the Browns do bring it. Like last year, they brought in Ronnie Hickman and Tanner McAllister. And
I think the Browns would actually be a great place for them, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, because what they do is
Luke Whitehead, DeJuan Jones.
Yeah, if they're not. The thing about bringing in a guy like Matt Jones is, you're not unturning anything. You're not bringing in a guy from Slippery Rock who no one's ever heard of that gained 200 pounds over the summer and is all of a sudden a football player. I understand that. You're not uncovering the next, I don't know, who's the linebacker that played at like Mount Union that was really good for the Redskins like 10 years ago. Whatever, you know who I'm talking about. He was a linebacker that was like 5'10", and was like a 9-time Pro Bowler and was very good. And he went to like John Carroll is where he's from. Anyways, whatever. You're not uncovering that guy, but he is in a program that is very much like a professional sports, like an NFL team. So that's a guy that you could probably bring in and be like, hey, listen, this guy is not the worst player in the world. He can take up a roster spot and not have to deal. There's not going to be a huge learning curve. I could see that happening with Matt Jones. Kind of like he did with Tanner McAllister. Tanner McAllister and Matt Jones are very similar prospects as far as the resume goes. You can't tell me Tanner McAllister was any good. You know what I mean? That guy didn't get drafted. He didn't even start for, he was barely a starter, right? Kind of like Matt Jones. Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
That's fair. No,
moving on to defensive end.
Wow, tricky game of how many times we said.
What'd you say? You cut out there.
So if we had a drinking game about, does that make sense? We'd be hammered.
I know, right? Okay, I apologize. I've been saying that too often because I always say, does that make sense? And then Michael always says, if we're being, what does he always say? Let's keep it real. Let's be real. He always says, let's be real. He always says, let's be real. And I say, does that make sense? So you're right. Thank you for calling me out. We should make that a drinking game. Defensive end, Javonte Jean-Baptiste, who was an Ohio State player, transferred to Notre Dame for his last season. You like him way better than I put him in the same tier as Matt Jones, dude. I think he's got an explosive. I think he's very fast. I think he's very explosive. I think he's a good athlete. He's got no moves. He's got no pass rushing moves. He was the guy. He would always beat the guy off the. If he couldn't beat you off the snap, he wasn't going to make a play. That was who he was at Ohio State, and that's why he was always a rotational guy. I don't see him developing into anything more than a practice squad guy. Kind of like what we talk. Him and Matthew Jones, I feel like are on the same tier. Do you disagree? I think you disagray with this, right?
I do disagree with you. I think he's going to get drafted. Obviously, day 3.
Really?
I have a 6th round grade on him.
Wow.
And here's the thing with him. I think that he is a guy that you're going to see be brought in as a potential developmental piece. There is a strong chance that piece never develops, and then he will be playing in the UFL. But I think that you just got to take that chance. Just one, he's the type of guy you bring in just to like boosted the numbers in your defensive line room, and like just in case. And that's kind of like my main point. Like there's no other like I think he's gonna do this. I think he's gonna no. I think he's gonna be a guy that gets hit in rotation, and then you send him on his way.
Yeah, see, that's interesting to me. I know it doesn't sound like a big deal, but we're on completely different tiers. I mean, you got the guy. If you have him as a 6th rounder, that means you could see him developing into someone that can be a rotational player. I don't see that. I think on his best day, he sticks around in a roster, kind of like I can't even think of anybody to really compare him to Ohio State wise. I mean, like a really poor man's Taekwon Lewis, I guess, is what I don't know. I don't even know who to compare him to. It's been so long since Ohio. I mean, because Ohio State defensive linemen are usually kind of boom or bust. They're either really good or they're not in the NFL at all. And I do think that there's probably more of a middle ground with him.
They're either Chase Young or Haskell Garrett. Got it.
Exactly. Yeah. And I put him more in the Haskell Garrett pile for sure. That's kind of how I view it. Yeah. Teron Vincent, right? Yeah. That's kind of how I view him.
Hey, you know what?
That's how I view him.
He's Troy Vincent's son, and that's notable.
Like I said, he just never did anything at Ohio State. Moving on, defensive tackle Michael Hall. I gave him a 2nd round grade. I think Michael Hall is a dude. I think he could develop into a star. This is a versatile guy. This is a guy with enough athleticism to play at the edge. That's not where you want him, but if you're trying to mix things up, I could see teams doing that versatility. I could see him playing an odd man front, even man front. It doesn't matter. That dude is athletic enough to do it all. His biggest issue is that he's small and his frame is kind of maxed out. He's about 6'2", 280 pounds. I don't think he's added any weight based off of what I've seen in person. I don't think that's going to hit. I don't think that the size is going to hinder him because he is so athletic. He is so quick off the ball. And we're seeing NFL defensive linemen that are his size thrive all the time more and more. But that's kind of where I would rather have a guy like him than a guy that would be afraid that they're going to eat themselves out of the NFL, if that makes sense. So I don't think that size is that big of an issue.
That makes complete sense. I think I also have the same kind of evaluation on him. I think the major thing that's going to play a factor, one, obviously the position group is not highly favored coming into this draft, along with the fact of when does the first interior defensive lineman come off the board. As of right now, I have it at 19 going to the Rams. I have that being Brian Murphy II. I think after that, you're going to see names that drop in quickly. Guys like Johnny Newton.
Johnny Newton's my dude. That's the guy I had number 1.
I love Johnny Newton too. Honestly, I had him and Murphy II like the same. Honestly,
I got to watch Newton in person. He's a bad dude. He's a bad man.
Just
been a bad man for a couple of years too.
You just love his hands.
Yeah, dude. He's just everything. It's really hard to nitpick his game.
Just look at the. This is gonna sound no Diddy. Look at the arch in his back when he's pass rushing. All right, that is a man that's gonna get upfield quickly. Okay. But you have Michael Hall that second tier though. I do. I think something that's really helped him out is Tavondre Sweat getting a DUI because I think that because of that, because already it's a limited board in terms of guys that you want in the first 2 days, right? And with Sweat's DUI, that's a big name that's dropping. And Hall, like you mentioned, Hall may not be the biggest dude, but he's not going to eat himself out of the league. He's shown incredible athleticism for the position, and he's not a guy that you're going to have to rely on immediately. So he can be a guy that you rotate in until he becomes into being an NFL caliber star. So, especially with the recent, I want to use recent, but there's been a lot of defensive tackles. I feel like in the past 4 years that have come in as high first round, high second round picks. I have just stunk it up. That I think that there's going to be a late push into the first round for them, and then because of that, once that first round money goes away, then you're gonna start seeing them go in the second because that's just such a differential pay grade that you're willing to take that chance more. My prime example is Javon Kinlaw. For everyone that's wondering about where's the point coming from, Javon Kinlaw started this whole argument for me.
That's fair. I love Javon Kinlaw, but he has not lived up to expectations. So That's very fair. Moving on, where we at now? We're at linebackers. Is that right?
I believe so. So yeah.
So we got Tommy Eichenberg. I gave Tommy Eichenberg a 3rd-round grade.
Yep.
He's basically the linebacker version of tight end. I think that he's got star potential. He's a downhill thumper. What do you always say? He's a worker. He's a weight room guy. He's your classic blue collar. Yeah. He's just not a great athlete. He's not a bad athlete. He really is not a bad athlete.
What?
His instincts allow him to not. His athleticism is not bad enough to where it's going to hamper him as an NFL player. Obviously, real speed is going to burn him, but I don't think he's going to be out of place. I like Tommy Eichenberg. I think some team is going to draft him in the 3rd or 4th round and get a starting NFL linebacker. Very much in the same way that you see with Jerome Baker, Raekwon McMillan, maybe guys that aren't stars, but guys that you don't want to get rid of and that you feel comfortable in the lineup. Maybe like a notch above you, because I'm a Browns fan, maybe a notch above a guy like Taki, right?
Sione.
Where you at with that?
I'm actually in complete agreement. So I'm actually trying to look up. So in the Bill Carroll Mockapalooza, I actually drafted both Tommy Eichenberg and Steel Chambers. Chambers was late in the 7th. But I'm trying to find where I drafted Eichenberg, because I have the same kind of projection about him. I think he's gonna be a very serviceable linebacker. He's gonna be a solid star in the NFL. Never gonna develop into a star, but he's not gonna be a guy that loses you games. I think he plays the run very well. And quite frankly, his floor is special teams ace, right? So
and the reason I say that I think he can develop into being a star, I again, being a Browns fan, I was there for the Joe Schobert years. Right, he's to me he's a notch above Joe Schobert, and Joe Schobert was getting like 200 tackles a year for like 3 years in a row. That to me is a star. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That to me is a star though, right? For 3 years he was one of the, when you ranked the top linebackers, he was it, right? There's no reason for him to not be on that Paul Posluszny level. There's not a whole lot that he lacks. Is he going to be in that top tier like CJ Mosley? No. But, you can still be a star being in that 2nd tier. And I can see him developing into that. I think it'll take some time, but I think he can develop into that. Next linebacker, Steel Chambers. I gave him a 4th-round grade. I don't have the same outlook on him as I do Tommy Eichenberg. I don't think Steel Chambers can develop into a star. I think he can develop into a quality, okay linebacker. I think he's very athletic. I think he has sideline to sideline speed, but he's very raw, and he's not athletic enough to where that's not fair. He's raw enough and not quite good enough to where I don't think a team is going to be super patient with him. So I think he's going to stick around the NFL for a while. I think he's going to spot start some games, but I don't think he's going to develop into anything special. I'm trying to think of a good example. Jacob, I think that So Taki's probably a pretty good example for him, right? I said Taki was a notch below Eichenberg. He's probably in the same tier as
comparing everybody to Sione Taki.
Different levels. I'm a Browns fan. I'm trying to think of a linebacker who. You know what? I think I think Eichenberg and Malik Harris. I think that we talked about those linebackers, the Malik Harrison, Jerome Bakers, Raekwon McMillan. Steel Chambers is a notch below those guys. I can't think of one off the top of my head. I guess you have to go back to like Niall Diggs, I guess, with the Packers. Just a guy who's in the NFL, just existing. A Jag.
So when I look at Steel Chambers, I drafted him like 2 picks before the end of the draft, just to kind of put that into perspective. But that would be, he would be a steal at that point, because I think he's going to be in the NFL for a long time. I think he can be a roster guy. I think he can be a special teams ace, all that. So if you're getting that in the 7th round, awesome. I do think he goes earlier than that. I do think it's going to be 4th or 5th. I have like Darren Bates as my comp, a guy that rotationally plays linebacker and is a punt protector and can get down the field quickly to go tackle somebody. Right, and that's where I have Steel Chambers. I don't see him being a full-time starter. I see him he's like Will Compton essentially, but more athletic.
Okay. See, there we go. I like that. So the problem with the Darren Bates comparison, I think I don't mind the Darren Bates comparison.
Okay.
I guess the problem with both those comparisons. Here's the.
Well, I think he did sense. They played special teams for a long time. Occasionally played linebacker. Occasionally made plays. 10 years in the league, 8 years in the league. Like,
but here's the issue. Here's why I think he's a slight notch above those guys. Those guys are journeymen, right? They were journeymen because they're not quite good. Will Compton's a bit. I think Will Compton is because he was with the Titans. No, I mean he was really on with the Titans for one goddamn year. Yeah, those guys were journeymen. I don't think Steel Chambers. I think Steel Chambers is better than a journeyman, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I also think Steel Chambers could change positions and be a long-time NFL veteran, but nobody wants to hear that thought of mine.
What position?
He could laugh at me and call me an idiot, but just trust me, the way the NFL's trending, he could potentially be the new style of fullback as we move forward.
I don't disagree with that. There's going to be I think Steel Chambers was recruited as a running back, so it's not like what you're saying is idiotic.
Imagine him running the Texas side of the backfield.
Now put linebackers on seats. Here you're going to have the same problem at fullback as you do. Well, not really. He's not.
Unless that'd be his primary position. I'm just saying, he's like a utility guy.
Yeah, I think that there's always going to. Okay, if you want a utility guy, wouldn't you rather have Benson out of Kansas State, or you know what I mean? Like he's not quite good enough to do. That's why he didn't play running back at Ohio State. Because he doesn't do when we talk about like Cade Stover, like, oh, he's not great at anything. He's still good at a lot of stuff. He's not. Steel Chambers is not. God, I feel like I'm just shitting on Steel Chambers. I just don't. He's not good at anything. Does that make sense? He's just average at everything. And I think you deal with the same issues. If you look at Ohio State linebackers in the past, Pete Werner, Baron Browning, both those guys are good. I'm not comparing. Malik Harrison. That guy's he could still be good. I'm not comparing, but Jerome Baker's good. Raekwon McMillan has been a very serviceable starter. Darren Lee was a bust, but a first rounder. Oh, you know what? Josh Perry's a good example. Josh Perry flamed out of the NFL after a couple of years, but he was okay when he played. I think Steel Chambers lasts longer in the NFL, but he's the same kind of window, if that makes sense. Same kind of ability, just different. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
same tier.
It does. And I didn't want to be a dick, but I thought you were about to say Tough Borland.
No, he's better than Tough Borland. Tough Borland's slow. Tough Borland had no athleticism.
No, he's slow, but I thought you were talking about same career trajectory of no career.
I was going to say, he was in the NFL at all. Yeah, Tough Borland. Yeah, I envision Tough Borland having the same. We talk about Vontae G. That's the career arc.
Have a cup of coffee. He had a sip of water from the jug. He had the cone.
I think that he's got the same career arc as Baptiste, who's one of your favorite guys. All right, let's move on. Let's move on to the cornerback position. So there's one cornerback that spent time at Ohio State, Ryan Watts, who transferred to Texas this past year. I gave him an undrafted free agent grade. He was okay. He had his issues. Dude, he couldn't play at Ohio State, and Ohio State's defensive backs were bad. You know, he was better at Texas, but he was by no means a strength, if that makes sense. I think he gets a cup of coffee as an undrafted free agent. That's where I'm at with Watts.
Again, Bill Carroll, if he didn't produce in college, what makes you think he's going to produce in the NFL?
Well, that's what I'm saying. But he deserves because he started at Texas and he did start at Ohio State for a second. He deserves someone to pick up the phone. I just wouldn't draft him. Does that make sense?
I'm just saying, plenty of brothers started at Texas. Doesn't mean that they deserve an opportunity in the NFL. I'm not saying that you don't give Ryan a call. I'm just saying.
I think it does, though. I do. I know that you view that differently, right? But and that makes sense. You're allowed, and GMs. There's going to be GMs that do both. There's going to be GMs who are like, I'm not wasting my time with that guy. I've seen what he can do. But there's also going to be GMs being like, listen, that guy played at Texas. We just need a dude to be on the practice squad that can be in a professional environment. There's GMs that do it both, and that either way, we both agree. We're probably not wasting a draft pick on him. Josh Proctor at safety. I think I gave Josh Proctor a third round grade. I think that someone's going to get a real steal with him. Probably gonna draft him later. I think he has star potential. This is a guy. He's a downhill hammer when he wants to be. He doesn't have any physical weaknesses at all. He dealt with injuries. That's it. There's no physical. He's not slow. He's not small. He's not weak. He checks all those boxes. I will say he missed too many tackles at Ohio State. He did miss too many tackles at Ohio State. But I mean, that's something that can be cleaned up. I think someone's going to get a starter in the NFL with him.
I just think because of the amount of players in that position, plus the position value, I have him as a 5th rounder, potentially 6th.
How is that possible? How are we so far apart on that? Because the safety position is weak.
I just look at all the guys: Newbin, Hicks, Bullard, Bishop, Bullock, Brady. I can't say his last name. Simpson, Smith, Sionevaki, Polynesians. Let's go. Kaitan Oladipo. I'm not naming my guys. I just named the guys that were selected over him in the Mockapalooza. Like this is 16 different GMs, like pushing all the way down, and I'm in agreement with them. I don't know. I don't see it, if I'm being honest with you.
Really? So because you gave him a 5th round grade.
Yeah, because of the position and the amount of players that are in that position. If there's a different draft, I think he'd be higher. If that helps.
Interesting. So you disagree with the fact that you think he can be because I think he can be a high level starter in the NFL.
I think he could develop into being a high level starter in the NFL. I just think it's going to take time, aka his entire rookie contract.
I can tell by your tone that we disagree on his standing. So, we will revisit. So there's 2 guys. Everybody else. So to recap,
yes,
there's 2 guys that we did not see eye to eye on.
Correct.
There's Javonte Jean-Baptiste. So we'll have to write that down. Someone in the chat write that down so we can revisit in 3 years. And then Josh.
I strongly believe you're probably right about him more than I am.
who else did we disagree? Let's recap. Myron Williams, we agreed. Marvin Harrison, we agreed. Case Stover, we agreed. Matthew Jones, we agreed. Michael Hall, we agreed. Jean-Baptiste, I already said we didn't agree. Ryan Watson, we agreed. Eichenberg, we agreed.
Yep.
Did we agree on Steel Chambers? Yeah, we agreed on Steel Chambers.
Yeah, for the most part.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll write that down.
We're like a round off, but pretty much the same.
So in 3 years, we will revisit Baptiste and Proctor. Good. So we're already at an hour. Do you want to go? Do you want me to give you I'm going to give you my top 3. I'm going to give you 3 guys that are going to be, I think are going to be 1st round draft picks. You make a quick comment. You ready?
Let's do it.
This is the order. JT Tuimoloau. I think that's my number 1 Ohio State Buckeye. What do you think?
No.
What?
Jack Sawyer.
You don't think he's a 1st rounder?
Oh no! Wait, sorry. Are we saying? Are you asking me? Are they going to be a 1st rounder, or is that like the first Ohio State guy drafted next year?
Well, let's do that. He's my first. I think he's going to be the 1st Buckeye drafted. But let's do this. Do you at least think he's going to be a 1st rounder?
No doubt.
No doubt. Okay. You do not see him as the number 1 Buckeye off the board.
I do not.
Can I ask who?
Jack Sawyer.
I don't understand. You're not you.
What?
Everybody keeps telling me that, and I don't understand why everybody keeps telling me that.
Okay.
Is it because Sawyer had 3 sacks in the Cotton Bowl?
It's because I don't know. I just have this feeling about him. I just look at his body type. I look at his play. I compare his efficiency to mix up his pass rush moves and what his effectiveness with his pass rush moves is, and I'm betting based off potential. I feel like we're seeing GTT max out. If I'm being honest with you, where I think Sawyer has a long way to go. I think Sawyer next year is going to be a top 5 pick. I think JTT is going to be a top 15 pick.
See, I like Sawyer. I think Sawyer. I think Sawyer has 1st round potential. I'm not debating that. I agree with you there. It's just
look at him. He's a fucking lumberjack.
To me, JTT has had more games where he's looked like an elite defensive end. Jack Sawyer has had one game.
Take out Penn State, and how many more games does JTT have?
A few. I mean, there's some games where he's really down. I mean, at pretty much every game last year, he was really hard to stop. There's a part of me that thinks he would have been a 1st rounder this year. Jack Sawyer cannot say that. I can't say that about Jack Sawyer.
I think JT this year would have been either the 4th or the 5th edge.
I mean, he was getting double teamed and pushing people around pretty much all year this year. Jack Sawyer, I can't say that about. And I like Jack Sawyer. I don't want to bash on Jack Sawyer. Just you're not the first person that has said that to me. And it just befuddles me because I'm like, dude, what? Because I just think that JTT's special. I honestly think that there's a chance by the end of this year, we're going to look back on JTT's Ohio State career and compare him with some of the greats. We're going to put him in the same tier as Bosa's, as the Youngs. When we look, I think he's going to explode. I really do. All right, moving on. My next guy.
I would like to add, I agree with you, but I think we put Jack Sawyer and him in that category.
Well, we'll put that on the list. Denzel Burke is my number 2 guy. I think he's a first rounder. He's my number 2 Buckeye. Okay. Do you agree or disagree?
I disagree.
How do you disagree on that? That's been pretty. I haven't gotten any pushback from anybody on that. That's been pretty.
JTT is my 2nd overall Buckeye.
Oh, okay, but right, okay, that's fine. But you first rounder though.
Oh, 100%. I think he goes within the top 25. But so if I may say my list is got the top 3, I think at least 4 Ohio State Buckeyes get drafted in the first round next year.
Well, let me give you. Where's Burke on your list?
He's my number 3.
Okay, that's fair. All right, yeah, we're not that far. All right, let me give you my next guy, and then you can give me your 4. My number 3 guy, you're going to disagree with Donovan Jackson.
Wow, you're right.
Love Donovan Jackson. I think he's a fucking dude. I think he's got the length. I think he's got the size. I think that the only thing that held him back last year was I don't know what was going on. He looked a little slower than he should have. I think that gets rectified this year with a better offensive line. That dude is a dog. I think someone is going to look at him and they're going to say, I'm not going to say Quentin Nelson, but I think that someone is going to look at him the same way they looked at Quentin Nelson of like, that guy's an automatic starter. That guy's an automatic high-end guard. That guy's going to help my new quarterback. Let's rock and roll. He's a first-round pick.
I have a high 2nd on him, but I can see where you're getting at, and I can definitely see how he can play himself into being a high first-round pick, or even just a
Where is he in your Ohio State ranking list?
I believe 5.
Really? Who do you got? So you have Sawyer, JTT, Burke. Who's 4?
Quinshon.
Quinshon?
Let me tell you exactly what's going to happen next year. Him and Travion are going to be neck and neck, right? And then there's going to be
I don't think that's going to be true either.
No, I'm talking about let me rephrase. They're going to be neck and neck in terms of opportunities. Okay, in terms of carries, right?
I don't think that that's going to be true.
Really?
Carries or touches?
Touches.
See, I don't think that's going to be true because Henderson's just a way better receiver.
Quinshon's going to get more of the.
Well, okay, let me preface that. Touches, you might be right, but I think if we go by yards, Henderson is going to be more. I think Henderson is going to have the more impressive year, just because he's more explosive. He gets many touches in the passing game.
Let me take a look at Ohio State's schedule, and I will pinpoint to you exactly the point in which Quinshon Judkins becomes a first rounder. Because I'm gonna tell you exactly what's gonna happen. I hate to say it, Henderson's gonna get hurt, and then Quinshon's gonna go off 100.
Dude. That is so shitty. That is such a shitty thing to wish.
I'm not. Wait, wish? I'm not wishing it. I want to tell both these guys.
Travion isn't that.
Found the game.
Yeah.
I found the game. At Penn State, November 2nd. Henderson's gonna get banged up. Ohio State's gonna be down like 17, like 12, like 13. It's gonna be like late in the 3rd, and then
they're gonna
Quinshon Judkins take over and run them to Quinshon taking them to the house every single drive after. I bet you. That's what's gonna happen. All right. Drew Allen's gonna come out firing hot. All right. Singleton and what's his nuts is gonna be running. It's gonna be a back and forth battle. And Quinshon's gonna say, "I'm the dude. This is why I left Ole Miss." And he's gonna drop 300 on them.
Watch it. We're saying a lot right now. We're saying a lot right now.
And I'm not saying Henson's gonna be out for a while. He's gonna be banged up, and he's gonna come back in the next week, and he's gonna clearly be the number 2 guy. All right. And Quinshon's gonna be averaging 140 for the rest of the season. All right. And you know what? I bet you in the game, Quinshon wins it for Ohio State.
Well, we'll certainly see. I think Quinshon's great. I think Travion's great. You might be right. I don't know. I'm not super passionate about it. I just think Travion's better. So that's not something I'm super passionate about. So I probably wouldn't put money on it.
I think people have been studying Quinshaw since his rookie. NFL teams have been studying him since his rookie year at Ole Miss. All right, they've been like highly impressed, and he's gonna go to a team that just like is in like that championship window that just needs like another dynamic playmaker, and boom, he's the number 4th Ohio State Buckeye off the board.
Like I said, I don't. You might be right. Henderson has. I'm not going to sit here and act like Henderson hasn't dealt with his fair share of injuries. So you might be right. I wouldn't bet on that. I wouldn't bet against you. I don't agree, but I wouldn't bet against you.
I would never bet on a player getting hurt because that's
no. I know what you mean,
but I'm saying, look at.
You have to look at his resume. I understand. Yeah.
So that's how I feel. But yeah, we don't know until we get into the season. But I'm excited, man. Ohio State has so many killers on that team that I think if there's a year that they take it, this is the year.
We'll see. We will certainly see. We hit the hour mark. Let's go ahead. Let's get out of here. Where can the people follow you? We got 60 people left with us. Everybody in the chat's gone, so you're gonna be talking. But where can they follow you?
What I want to say, I appreciate everyone for tuning in and I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. You can follow me on Twitter at MNS Today. I write for Team MBS Media. That's where I do some of my Ohio State coverage and just college football coverage in general. And if you want to check out my work for the NFL, check out USA Today's Rams Wire. Probably that USA. I'm a part of the Wire family with Josh Keatley and the boys. And check out all my stuff over there. Do a lot of draft prep for them. So if you want to get my further takes on prospects, again, check me out, Rams Wire, USA Today.
Yes, and Brock's going to be back on as soon as the Rams take God damn it, who do we disagree on? When they take Josh Proctor in the 3rd round, he's going to be back on to talk about the pick. But I'm Josh Keatley. You can follow me on Twitter.
I could see that. Yes, I could generally see them. When he's one of those comp picks. He's probably going to kill it, too. That's the worst part.
I know. You can follow me on Twitter at JoshKeatley16. Check out my work at Buckeyes Wire. Just dropped the UFL transactional article. New Buckeye enters the United Football League. Check him out. Check me out. Check out Michael Chen. Michael Chen will be off of baby duty next week. Back on the show. Thank you for tuning in, and we are out. Go Bucks.